Hello, my name is Paul Marchbanks, and this is Digging in the Dirt with a few thoughts on in-person teaching. Before I share some thoughts about education, it's only fair that you know I have a history. And I'm not just referring to the fact that, excluding my first year of graduate school, I've been teaching at some level or another since 1995. What I mean is that I have a skeleton of sorts hiding in my career closet. You see, I was invited into my first full-time teaching gig after substituting for a few weeks at a private K-12 school in Austin, Texas, and was fired only 15 months later. After a year in which I had taught 6 different classes, supervised after-school care, played piano for the school's production of The Music Man, and produced a talent show to raise money for the senior trip, the assistant principal called me to his office and let me go. I was floored and begged him to speak with more parents about what I had accomplished since my arrival, but to no avail. Until, that is, 2 months later, when he called me up and asked me to return. As my wife's job had kept us in the area, I accepted the offer and taught 2 more years before leaving for graduate school, years in which the administration fully supported me. But why was I fired in the first place? The answer lies, I think, in a few factors which continue to characterize my approach to teaching, principles some will find abrasive and which I should own up to before discussing my opinions about post-COVID college instruction. Principle number 1, push boundaries. Experience has only reinforced my conviction that students remain more thoroughly engaged when the instructor tackles hard topics openly, employs non-traditional teaching strategies, and encourages students to work hard. During my first year of teaching, I taught Geoffrey Chaucer's salacious Miller's Tale and took students to a screening of Baz Luhrmann's wild and frenetic Romeo and Juliet, providing opportunities for hormonal teenagers to talk openly about the cultural impact of injecting humor and melodrama into fictional representations of young love and sex. I invited students to bring lyrics from their favorite rock music so that we could discuss the songwriter's diction and grammar choices as well as their worldviews, and allowed students to share their original compositions with the class. One student's explicit poem became the last in a long string of marks against him and led to his being expelled. This is not to suggest that my courses were all fun and games. Such activities helped sustain student interest as I led them through stylistically challenging poetry and fiction, and I hope helped enliven their spirits as they strove to meet rigorous academic standards. Principle number 2. Counsel, don't carry. In The Problem of Pain, C.S. Lewis holds that to truly love others, we need to consider their long-term good more than their immediate happiness. Now, while I thoroughly enjoy watching students get excited during class discussion or laugh hilariously during small group activities, it's far more important to me that they push and stretch themselves. To reach our full potential, we all occasionally need to be challenged, to strive for what we once thought out of reach. Teachers can either kowtow to complaints and end up inflating both grades and students' vanity, or we can hold to rigorous standards while walking alongside and regularly assisting students whom we genuinely hope will excel. In that first teaching job, a number of high school students had had difficulty adjusting to the benchmark I used when assessing their work. It took some the entire year to recalibrate their efforts. In the interim, I dealt with complaints from students who had their sights set on Ivy League schools, parents outraged that their kids were not sliding smoothly through my courses, and administrators upset that students' grade averages made them ineligible for sports. Which brings me to my third principle. Value consistency more than expediency. Instructors and administrators at small schools wear all kinds of hats. In my first year, I taught keyboarding, physical education, Bible, and even government and economics, in addition to the literature courses for which I was best suited. Our vice principal was one of our most respected math teachers, and our headmaster also served as the basketball coach. You see where this is going, right? Eligibility in school sports rested on students maintaining passing grades in all of their courses, and a handful of star athletes failed to meet this criterion during basketball season due to their grades in my courses. I repeatedly experienced pressure to hold off on incorporating this exam score, that paper grade, into a student's average until the next big game had passed, and I refused. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of physical fitness and competitive sports. I'm an athlete myself and swam competitively through high school and college. I do, however, believe in the importance of remaining as equitable as possible when enforcing standards. Present every student with the same high bar, I say, and then make yourself available to help them develop the mental muscles and work habits necessary to succeed. Though the school's administrators obviously did not initially think what I had to offer was worth the hassle that came with it, they eventually changed their minds and allowed me to gather a couple more years of incredible memories, developing relationships with a number of students that have continued to this day. Fast forward a few decades, and I'm a tenured literature professor with the same principles facing a rapidly changing academic landscape. We apply cost-benefit principles to teaching just as readily as to any other profession, whatever our position in the education system. Students employ their own unique calculus every day, weighing the relative values of study and rest, work, and self-care. Administrators calculate the best way to encourage strong teaching, realizing that an overly trusting, laissez-faire approach can be just as disastrous as tyranny. Instructors wrestle regularly with how much time to give their jobs without sacrificing their own mental and physical health. Though teaching traditionally involves considerable sacrifice outside normal working hours, few of us chose the profession in hopes of martyring ourselves. For years, the public has assumed that teaching is a kind of higher calling pursued by saints willing to work without compensation equal to their efforts. Like the clerk in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, who gladly spends what little money he has on books, today's academics presumably joyfully devote themselves to their jobs without obsessing over low wages. How else does one explain the tens of thousands of teachers who fill the ranks from kindergarten up through graduate school? Many of us do love our work for its own sake, and to be honest, quite a few see the profession as not only a public service, but a kind of moral mission, a journey taken alongside students who are engaged in developing their hearts as well as their heads. At the same time, teachers have lives outside their work, or at least we try to. A block of 4 to 5 hours in which no work must be done is a godsend, and a day off, truly and fully off, is no small miracle. We find rest where we can, which is why our present situation is so very dangerous. The quarantine imposed by COVID-19 forced us to accept less. Less personal interaction with students whose 2D images and inconsistent internet connections functioned as walls as often as open doors. Lowered expectations for class participation from students who multitask during Zoom sessions. Decreased trust that assessments were measuring individual competence and not the network of friends and resources on which students could stealthily rely during testing. COVID also required much more work in the short run to transition to different teaching strategies requiring developments of new materials. Additional time reading a growing number of essays, particularly among those of us who stripped away all those objective portions of online quizzes and exams that invite cheating. Extra attention to mental health, both our own and that of lonely, anxious, and physically inactive students. The difficult transition back to in-person teaching has proven so stressful that many teachers have abandoned their careers, seeking alternative employment or early retirement. Those who remain face decreased funding, heavier workloads, and students accustomed either to taking course overloads filled with easier online classes or to working long hours at jobs begun during that 2-year period when so many schedules were flexible. Reintroducing students to the rigors of traditional academic work, in which they must actually store information in their heads and then recall it on the fly during class discussion or timed writing is fraught with tears, anger, and despair. Having dined on the oh-so-sweet confections of asynchronous coursework, it's difficult returning to classes that require you to chew slowly and digest thoroughly. The temptation facing instructors right now, particularly those at the collegiate level, is to continue riding the wave generated by our colossal efforts during COVID and to rely too heavily on methodologies that save us more time the longer we use them, at the cost of student interaction and engagement. The allure of more sleep, time with family, increased flexibility when writing, and additional opportunities to complete independent research, all of these things combine to create a powerful inducement to do the hard work of creating online materials now so that we can breathe more easily down the road. Prior to COVID, online teaching at private colleges and public institutions was relatively rare. A few professors employed it, to be sure, particularly at polytechnic universities like my own, but extraordinary online instruction was understood to be the exception rather than the rule. Prospective students who sought out e-learning did so because they recognized its practicality compared with other options. Online education has undoubtedly proven valuable for those with full-time jobs, mobility complications, meager funding, and time-intensive family care responsibilities. Earning certification or a degree online creates options for those who would otherwise remain stuck in jobs they dislike and improves the prospects of many in vulnerable financial circumstances. I also won't deny the benefits of supplementing in-person teaching with online resources. I've continued to assign some of the video lectures I created during COVID, including fact-dumping biographical sketches of assigned authors like Elizabeth Barrett Browning, because doing so allows me to spend more time workshopping student writing during class. The occasional pre-recorded lecture provides an instructor freedom to attend a conference without canceling class, and I've enjoyed creating short video introductions to help prepare students for the difficult films I teach. And yet, much is lost amidst the rush to replace in-person instruction of certain courses with cheaper and faster alternatives. There's a reason I replaced a large lecture online course during COVID with 2 writing-intensive courses that required tens of hours of extra grading, and why I refused to stack courses so that single lectures could serve double duty, and why I am deeply ambivalent about asynchronous teaching, which apparently is in my future at some point. Actually, there are a few reasons. I suppose one is that I'm a rebel at heart who wants to lead a countercultural charge. As student attention spans contract and their patience wears as thin as the newest portable screens, just choosing to step into a classroom, pull out a book, and step into the flow of live conversation for a few hours constitutes a radical act. Teaching is not for the faint of heart. Due to the heavy responsibility assumed by anyone who steps into the role of instructor, the book of James declares, "Not many of you should become teachers." This caution seems applicable to how we teach, as well as the subject matter we select. As Samuel Taylor Coleridge once noted, the very best literature has organic unity. Quote, "The fullness of its development is one and the same with the perfection of its outward form." The British poet recognized that the design of a literary work and its content shape one another in a mutually reciprocal fashion. In the same way, the structure of a course shapes its content. Teaching pedagogy and course design influence what students take away from their experience. In addition to doling out a series of potentially useful facts, the way we teach inevitably recommends a particular attitude towards that information. We entertain or dismay, speak in generalities or anchor theories to concrete examples, perpetuate stereotypes or work to dismantle them, and model learning strategies that will either help or hinder students' future success. We also, whether we mean to or not, intimate something about the student's own value as human beings. With anxiety and depression on the rise, affirming students' very existence, not to mention their individuality, has become an uncommon gift. Most students appreciate being called on by name, demonstrating that you bothered to memorize the preferred nomenclature, nicknames, pronouns, etc., so as to more easily distinguish them from one another. They like it when you pay attention to their nonverbal cues as well as their words when fielding their questions, and when you slow down enough in your busy schedule to chat after class. The latter is always a challenge for me. Structuring sessions in a way that facilitates interaction can also prove life-giving, providing students who customarily seek refuge in handheld screens the valuable opportunity to exercise their interpersonal skills. Such training is apparently in short supply. A tech support friend of mine regularly laments those college graduates incapable of communicating effectively with others when problem solving as a team. And an engineering major recently told me that too few of his classrooms foster real, meaningful interaction among participants. It's a blessing to students then to set up class so that they must listen to and interact with diverse perspectives. Rearranging desks into a large circle allows back and forth exchanges to play out in real time much more quickly and comfortably than in Zoom, making it less likely students will misinterpret the intention of each other's contributions. Roundtable conversations encourage eye contact and provide practice at interpreting subtle shifts in one another's tone. They also reward students who track the course of a conversation across multiple voices, instead of withdrawing into a bubble and then accidentally repeating what another student said moments earlier because they weren't paying attention. Breaking the class into still smaller circles allows for even more meaningful connections to form. Once a quarter, whether I'm teaching a literature or a film course, I pair off students to complete activities in which they work together to recall keywords I've removed from lines of poetry or dialogue, a task very similar to Mad Libs. Students pick each other's brains, consider serious as well as amusing possible answers, and generate plenty of laughter en route to agreement. We then go over each passage together as a class, drawing attention to the elements of form that shape each passage's effectiveness. This challenge attempts to do more than exercise the hippocampus. In addition to redefining the way students store and recall details from memory, it enriches the emotions students attach to assigned material, giving the amygdala a workout and increasing the chance that students will recall important details when writing an exam or a term paper. Small groups of 3 to 4 students open up even more possibilities. I sometimes assign each group a study question from those I've provided online ahead of our class meeting, requiring them to research the topic, reach consensus, and then share their conclusions with the class. Or I provide them select passages from our reading, passages grouped around a particular topic, and require them to formulate a debatable position using that evidence, a position complete with supporting claims and a well-wrought thesis. In either exercise, they pore over the evidence, organize their ideas, and then collaboratively present their arguments orally. I encourage group members to involve one another equally in both research and presentation, putting everyone on the spot, but in a supportive environment that affirms their individual contributions. I was quite timid in college myself, wanting to make sure I had all my bases covered before opening my mouth. So I can identify with the anxiety and discomfort some students have with public speaking. That's the very reason I require students to speak, and I provide them with multiple participation grades throughout the quarter so that they can adjust their efforts as they grow increasingly comfortable with me and with their peers. At least once a quarter, I have student groups get out from behind their desks and creatively interpret and then visually represent an important idea from the day's assigned reading. Occasionally, I give them chalk or dry erase markers and have them draw something that symbolically captures key ideas from the text. A fun activity that lets the visual artists in the class shine and which requires everyone to synthesize what they have read. Alternatively, I might hand the students duct tape and let them create props for generating what the French call a tableau vivant, or living picture. In this scenario, each group selects a key scene from the text, stages that dramatic moment, and then poses in place, while the rest of the class attempts to guess the nature of the scene and discuss why it matters. A couple times I've handed out blocks of clay to see what kinds of figures students mold as we discuss plot and characterization, fascinated by the physical features they decide are most important to give each character they create. Students have noted how relaxing it is to have something in your hand that warms to your touch as you manipulate it, and have found this particular artistic outlet not only enjoyable, but therapeutic. Other times I divide the class into halves and orchestrate a debate over some contentious issue raised by an assigned reading. Students prepare to defend their position by gathering evidence and anticipating counter-arguments, then deftly assemble their team's observations as they respond to the rapid attacks and claims of their opponents. This sort of interactive, multi-staged activity requires students to swiftly take notes, assemble arguments, and then time the delivery of their supporting claims so that they effectively counter their adversaries' evidence. Such in-person exercises challenge students to think creatively in the moment, helping prepare them for the unexpected dilemmas awaiting them, whatever their personal and professional futures. To add fuel to the fire, I regularly teach thematically difficult material that pokes and prods at the shields we all erect between ourselves and an unsafe, hostile world. I teach a general education course on the excruciating films of Danish auteur Lars von Trier, a Bible as literature course prefaced by content warnings, and a course on apocalyptic and dystopic literature that students say helped them process the trauma of the pandemic as it unfolded all around them. I also teach a 400-level seminar on the fiction of Virginia Woolf, whose lifelong struggle with depression permeates most of her novels, another on James Joyce's Ulysses, which registers the author's exploration of various identity markers, and multiple courses on disability issues, which spotlight cultural prejudices many of us would rather not think about. I teach these topics in these ways, not because I wish to make students uncomfortable, but because I believe that struggle can make you stronger, particularly when you feel that you're not alone. As a teacher, I try to climb alongside students as they scale the challenges I present them, calling out encouragement as we go and lending a hand whenever they're willing to accept it. It's so much easier to extend a hand in person than to rely on email exchanges and Zoom meetings. Students fall through the cracks much more readily when they can turn off academic problems with the flip of a switch. In the years I have left as a teacher, and I hope they are many, I hope to fill some of those cracks, not widen them.